Welcome to Acceldata video chat. I'm Girish Bhat. I lead certain functions, particularly marketing and GTM functions at Acceldata. Today, we are going to discuss the 7 answers to the top 7 questions related to data observability. I have the honor of welcoming Sanjeev Mohan, principal at Sanjmo. Sanjeev, welcome to today's session.
Thank you so much, Girish. It's such a pleasure to be talking to you. Data observability has become one of my sort of favorite topics, which if two and a half years ago, somebody would have asked me, I would have said, what is data observability? And now, I feel this is such a critical part of data and analytics stack.
Yeah, no, thanks for that great segue. And I think you've spent, as you said, you've been tracking data observability, but I think you had quite a bit of data journey, and your career is quite enriched with many years of data management experience. How about you share a little bit of that with our audience today?
Yeah, thank you so much, Girish, for asking that. Yes, I feel so much older when I talk to most people these days, and I keep wondering, when was it that I went from being the youngest person in the room to being the oldest person? But with some decades of experience, I guess, there is some maturity that eventually comes, hopefully. I started my career in the 90s working for Oracle. So I've been on the data side pretty much the entire time since I graduated from college. At that time, Oracle was a quintessential Silicon Valley company. It took care of its people. We had an amazing campus in Redwood Shores, which is still there in California. And from there, I then got bitten by the .com bug. So got into .com, started building a lot of websites that are still in existence today. And like Sephora, Hotwire, those were some of the ones that I was the data architect on that. And I did a lot of data modeling, DBA tasks, got into management consulting after that. So I was at Booz Allen Hamilton, and literally I learned how to look at things top down and not bottoms up, which really helped me prepare for my job at Gartner. Because in Gartner, we talked to people who are practitioners as well as decision makers. So having that depth of understanding the technology so you could help with decision making has been an amazing journey for me. And this is what I recommend to everybody: go deep so you can go high level and not be shallow when you research and give advice. Since I left Gartner last year in July, exactly a year ago, almost coming up to a year, I have branched out on my own, and now I am researching a lot of data management topics. DBMS still remains a big part of my career. I also look into data security, privacy, governance. Data governance is a very big part. And now data observability. Interestingly, data observability and data governance go hand in hand. And hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about it today.
Oh, fantastic. So your career advice, even though that's the 8th answer, I guess that's probably the most important one here before we get into data observability, is that be hands-on, get your hands dirty and wet and learn what it means before you become an advisor or an influencer. So there you have it, folks. We'll get started now. So Sanjeev, we have a list of questions about data observability, and I think let's get your perspective on this. So first of all, let's get started with what is this thing called data observability?
Yes, very good question. Girish, I feel that the data industry has been a bit of a laggard, and it may be not because of data industry itself, just the nature of data. Data is something that is very different from applications and infrastructure, in the sense that you cannot have the same kind of principles for infrastructure and applications as you can on data. If an application crashes, you can bring it back up. So like stateless applications are easy to recover from. Databases are more complicated. Data changes frequently. It has a context, a meaning that needs to be interpreted by the business requirements. If the databases crash, then you can get inconsistent or corrupt data, which would nullify everything you're doing. So because of data's peculiarities, what's happened is that it's only now that we are catching up with observing the data end to end. So we have a good grip over what is the health of my data, all the way from the time when the data was produced, transformed, and consumed, and then even maybe up to deletion. So the reason I'm telling this story of data compared to applications and infrastructure is because in that space of application and infrastructure, we've been doing observability for a very long time. It's not a new concept, because we needed to know how our infrastructures were behaving and proactively try to catch a problem. Now we are applying the same principles, which may fall under DevOps, into data, and now we are observing data, monitoring it, looking for anomalies, doing a sort of a triage, incident response, coming up with recommendations on how to fix that problem. So let me ask you this, Girish, you've had quite a career at observability, in the observability space before you made the transition into data observability. I'm going to turn the tables on you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you're right. I got started with what people used to call then IT operations or IT observability, and then application observability. And along the way, there was security observability or visibility to security systems at different companies like Splunk, Sumo Logic, NetScout, and among others. So you're right. There is a lot of innovation that's happened in the networking stack, in the application stack, the infrastructure and security stack. However, what I always thought was the so-called data layer was a big, huge, ginormous blob, right? Saying, hey, it's not my problem, it's someone else's problem. If there is an outage, many times in the cloud service provider side, it's like, hey, I will go talk to my cloud service provider. That's it. There wasn't much about, hey, let's try to unpack what is going on. Even though, as you rightly pointed out, the data systems, whether it's infrastructure, apps, and databases, among others, have experienced similar problems, but there wasn't much focus. So what I realized was that the innovation and the tools and techniques and modern ways of doing things from IT and security can be applied to data as well. And I started looking around at what are the companies and what's happening that's interesting in the space. And I encountered data observability thanks to some of the write-ups that you and others in the industry and Acceldata and others have done. So I started looking into that and realized that this is we need to modernize how data systems operate, and particularly data management, more cohesively. Bringing the proven concepts of app security and IT observability to data is the next passion for us to conquer.
Very nice. Yeah.
So, okay, that's a good setup, right? So let's now think about, there are hundreds of tools in the IT or application observability and security. But before we go down that path, let's look at what is the use, why should anyone care about this? We kind of talked about this at the high level, Sanjeev. Let's perhaps get your perspective on why should anyone care about this data observability category?
Great. So I'm going to answer this and talk about some use cases. One thing that just crossed my mind, Girish, I'm sure you saw this only in the last few weeks. Gartner came out with its new Magic Quadrant, a Magic Quadrant that all these years was called APM or IT Ops, now says IT Ops and Observability. So that's a new change even for Gartner. So their realization of how important the space is. So why do I need data observability? So let's look at a number of different use cases. Today, it's common for organizations to have hundreds, even thousands of pipelines that run all the time. I was going to say nightly, but it's no longer nightly. Now these pipelines are running all the time. I recently saw a survey that shows that even a small, medium-sized company has over 100 SaaS tools. A large enterprise has about 228 on an average. So when you have such a prolific number of data sources and you are extracting data, unifying, harmonizing that data so it's ready for consumption, something is going to break. If you have data observability in place, you can catch that anomaly much earlier in your pipeline than the consumer finding it. So imagine a CFO comes to his or her desk in the morning and says, that dashboard is not showing me the right numbers. My instincts tell me something is broken. All the hell breaks loose. You go back to the data engineer and now they start trying to find out which pipeline failed and did not bring the necessary data into the system. If you can catch that, then A, you've increased your reliability. Why does that matter? Because in the hyper competitive world we are in, it's all about revenue. So if I can keep my revenue going, I'm making data-driven decisions on data that I can trust. So trust and reliability are delivered through my data observability stack. And if I get that, then my end users are on to doing revenue generation things. That's one. The second use case is cost reduction. So if I can use my observability tool to even tell me how I am using my resources, and if those resources are being used optimally, then I can right size my resources. I can reduce the cost and make sure that I have right size infrastructure. So that's one. The second thing is so much time is spent these days trying to debug and triage what went wrong. We know data engineers are very hard to get. They're a precious commodity. Why are we wasting their time trying to do this no value add debugging of what went wrong in my pipeline? If I can have data observability tool help me with that visibility, then that helps me reduce my cost. So that cost reduction, sometimes we even call it FinOps, the right sizing of architecture. I said, huge use case for data observability. People don't even think about it. Another use case, why do I need data observability? Cloud migration. I have decades and decades of data that I may have collected over the years. Should I move the whole thing to the cloud? Well, in the cloud, it's not sunk cost like a CapEx used to be. I am going to pay for every storage and every bit of compute. So if I have junk data that I'm traversing through, trying to do a select statement and look for a nugget, I'm going to pay for it. Why should we waste our precious resources? Data observability can tell me what is the usage of that data, and hence how can I not take junk data into the cloud. So cloud migration becomes yet another use case. One more I want to talk about, and then I want to see Girish, if you want to add to this list, risk reduction. If I can have a good data observability tool and I can ensure I have higher availability, like one of the customers I was talking to recently was telling me that since they put data observability, they have not had a severity 1 issue in the last 2.5 years. So that means my system is available, and I'm not going to suffer a front page news in Wall Street Journal saying that this system is down and there are millions of people who cannot complete their financial transactions. So that loss of reputation and increase of productivity, that's such a big use case for data observability.
Yeah, I love it. The way in which you characterize the four categories of use cases around, tools, spend, cloud migration, and also risk mitigation. So love it. So to your point, right? So it's the way in which we look at the use cases fall into those categories as well. You talked about the SaaS tools. I've been trying to unpack the number of data tools used by enterprises. The number is anywhere from 20 to 50 or even 100, depending on the size of the company. And this is, again, Sanjeev, people often don't realize I'll tell a little story. When I was at Splunk, we acquired multiple companies. One of the companies we acquired in the machine learning space, it had 40 different tools within one product category, and it had 4 databases, right? So 4 databases, all so-called NoSQL databases, including, Mongo was one of them, among others. So 4 databases out of roughly about 40 different open source technologies they had, right? So if you think about the trend, there's a lot of tool proliferation problem, both from a legacy data management perspective as well as emerging tool. The ways of saying, hey, I'll do one tool for a small niche problem may get you one step ahead, but it'll actually, in my hypothesis, it'll put you back if you don't look at things holistically. So managing tool proliferation cohesively to provide not only, as you said, the FinOps / we call it spend intelligence, just because providing the ROI, so that are you getting the right values, one, plus the operational rigor, like you talked about, customers not having a severity one outages. Those are some of the things that we are consistently seeing. So fantastic. So we talked about what is data observability, why do I need? And then, you talked about Gartner having the application performance monitoring and now observability magic quadrant. But then the naysayer who's maybe listening to this may saying, okay, why can't I have Splunk do this, or Datadog do this, or yet another tool vendor who is in the APM or security space do it? In other words, why do I need to really have a separate solution for this, Sanjeev?
Great point. Yes. In fact, it's so funny. A lot of data observability tool vendors, when I talk to them, they want to be the data dogs of the world. And here's a funny thing: Datadog, Splunk, you mentioned, New Relic, Sumo Logic, Logic Monitor, App Dynamics, Dynatrace. There's just so many tools, and they're all very successful. All the ones I've mentioned are reasonably successful. Some of them are billion-dollar companies. So they are excellent in infrastructure monitoring, application performance monitoring. So obviously the question is, well, they're already doing that. They have the chops. They've been doing it for years and they're mature. Why can they not do it for data? This is where it comes to, there is a huge gulf between these apps and infrastructure and data. You really need to look at data. It's not enough to see, did my data transmission come in? I have to look at things like every day I get sales figures from store number 4762 in Scottsdale, Arizona. And all of a sudden, the sales number from store 4762 is half the amount. What went wrong? So at the infrastructure layer, you are not looking at the context of data. See, that's the difference. You really need to understand the data from a contextual point of view, and that requires a different mindset. That is a mindset with which a data engineer has. The infrastructure mindset is what the SRE has, or the site reliability engineer. So that's why I feel they're like two different worlds. So that's one. The second thing is, so you asked this question, why can the cloud provider or even my database vendor not provide me with this information? Again, I think there's a reason why you won't see it. It's because I don't, like you said, Girish, very well, 40 different sets of tools. So if each tool provider or AWS or GCP or Azure has its own, what if I'm hybrid multi-cloud? So to get that comprehensive end-to-end view, that the data originated in a SaaS tool, came to an object store, then I use maybe Talent or DBT or Informatica or something else, and then I landed it into Snowflake, use Looker. To get that view, I need to have a third-party platform independent, cloud vendor neutral tool.
You know, I really like the way in which you put it. It's like the database or the data platform vendor may provide you some monitoring into their tables and things like that, but that's a very narrow niche view. You miss out on what's happening all the way from your compute, your pipeline, and even probably visualization layer, if you think about it across your whole data infrastructure and applications.
And if I may add just one more thing, and this is to piggyback on the conversation, Girish, you and I had just last week with what's new in Snowflake Summit and Databricks Summit. So Snowflake has done an amazing job of having very fine-grained observability metrics inside the platform. But now Databricks has introduced Unity Catalog with its metadata API. So what does a third-party tool do? It says that the data comes in, lands on my object store. I may have a Delta Lake, I may have Snowflake, and I may have, a whole host of other tools. So the observability that these vendors provide is extremely important, because I'm going to bubble it up into my tool, and I'm going to bubble it up from the second tool, and I'm going to do a correlation. So I get this lineage, which you cannot get if it's in a single platform.
Perfect. Yeah. So I think we talked about the other tool vendors, like the APM vendors. How about the likes of AWS or GCP and others? Because people say, hey, they're cloud providers. Can they build it?
Yeah, there's no reason why they cannot. And should they build it? Absolutely. Let's say there's a small enterprise, and they say, we are an on-prem Microsoft shop. We are now going to move to the cloud, and we've decided we'll only be in Azure. You're in Azure because the obvious affinity of Microsoft stack, and Microsoft has a tool, then I would say, why not? Just use what's native to your cloud provider. Does it exist? Not yet. I have not seen a cloud provider provide this. So, but you just have to think about what is your risk tolerance. If you'll be in Microsoft stack, go for it. If you think you will be in future having a supplier that's sending you data from AWS and a data sharing arrangement in a different cloud, then you should look at third-party products.
Yeah, no, you're right. And also the world is what I like to call it's hybrid, meaning there is still, as you said at the outset, there's ginormous amount of data that's on-prem, and people are not just gutting it and writing it off completely yet. And while they may be onboarding new use cases, new applications to cloud-native tools such as or platforms such as Snowflake, Databricks, GCP Query, Azure, and AWS as well. So in between, it's not only multi-cloud between cloud-native platforms as you highlighted, but also between the on-prem and the so-called cloud native solutions, because I think that's what the industry is looking for. There are majority of the companies are hybrid cloud, even though it may not be a proper way of positioning themselves from a use case perspective.
Yeah, very well said.
Okay, cool. So this is a question that I'm sure you get a lot. Hey, how hard can this be? Isn't it like a matter of hours or minutes where I can use Tableau or Looker and create a visualization? Isn't that what I need?
Yeah, Girish, thanks for asking this. This to me is the classic build versus buy. And I am in favor of buying products that like AWS calls it undifferentiated heavy lifting. That undifferentiated heavy lifting, if there's a product, you should buy it. If you are going to get some business value out of it, for example, let's say you have certain processes and requirements that are extremely specific to your organization, then maybe you should build it. Or if you happen to have extreme scale, I was reading today, Walmart has its own cloud, for instance. Why did Walmart have to build its own cloud? Because they have like 10,000 edges. Seriously, that's, today news. So when you have this global span, or if you're Apple or Meta, maybe you may want to build it in-house because your needs are such. 99% of companies do not fall in that space. For those companies, building something will incur a lot of technical debt. Why do I say that? It's because you will spend all your time not building it, maintaining it. The cost to maintain a piece of software is 4 times the cost to build it. And new features will come in, new compute engines come into the picture. Now you're having to figure out, how do I extract metrics, like I said earlier, from from Unity catalog? Why do you want to be in this business of keeping up with this technology? It is best given to a best of breed software product whose entire reason of existence is to enhance these products.
Yeah.
So
No,
I'm sorry, that's a long-winded answer, but
no, I absolutely agree with you. What I see is it again depends on the lens of what people mean by data observability. If you're saying, hey, look, this is like a plugin for a Looker or a Tableau, yeah, sure, you can throw some experts at that, and a very narrow niche case. I mean, it's frankly, in my opinion, Sanjeev, I would love to hear your thoughts. It's very easy to do some visualization, integration, and call it data observability, right? So, but I think that's where the market is getting confused, saying, hey, this is just, that's why I call it it's a plug-in tool versus, are you looking at the compute layer? Are you looking at performance? Are you looking at pipelines across? In other words, are you addressing a need for a data engineer or a data analyst? That requires a different rigor. And to your point, I think you're saying is, hey, if it's a data analyst, perhaps a narrow niche, you can build it in-house. Otherwise, you would recommend procuring a solution.
Yeah, I see this. Sometimes I'll see, why can I not use Grafana? Yeah, you can use Grafana and visualize a dashboard for a niche part of your pipeline. I also see, why can I not use Great Expectations? It's open source, but Great Expectations will help you build these tests that you can put these checks, but it won't monitor and notify, route the alerts to the right places. So you really have to understand what is the capability you need, and what can you build versus what's available in the market. If you do that analysis, you will clearly see that these third-party products are innovating at a very rapid pace, and it probably makes sense to buy a tool.
Perfect. Okay, let's move on. So we've talked about, set the context of the industry, and I think we both agree that we recommend data teams to procure a third-party solution for data observability. So what's in scope for this? The reason I ask this question, Sanjeev, is if I look at data management, it's a $100 billion plus industry. There are at least 150 databases. Then there are data quality tools, data ops tools. There are maybe thousands of data-related tools. So then how do we make it easy for our audience to then, perhaps you can share what's in scope for data observability?
So the number of data tools that exist is a bane of my existence. So seriously. And so talking about the scope of data observability, this is in my newest research, which I put it on Medium. It's my company name, sanchmo.medium.com. And in that, I try to explain the scope of data observability, because I think this is the biggest source of confusion. First of all, I recently saw, by the way, one of the companies got bought by IBM last week. I saw in the press release, and it was quite revealing to see that the author had mixed observability, data observability, all in the same sentence. So it had some data observability companies, and then it mentioned companies like Cribble and some companies I'd never even heard of, and I'm wondering, wow, this is why there is so much confusion. So if we take out the ones that we talked earlier about, like Datadogs and Splunk, and just look at data observability, I've classified it into two different groups. I'm saying that we should look at it from data consumption and data engineering. Why am I taking it to the next level and making it even more granular? Is because these are slightly different personas. Although I believe there should be only one tool, but the reality is that we're seeing two types of tools. The first one, data consumption, these are the tools that are mostly focused on data quality. So they tend to be more business focused, and they're looking at KPIs like freshness of data, how complete is the data, schema drift, and things like that. These are data consumption because they affect my reports and dashboards. The second type, when we talk about scope, are the data engineering centered data observability tools. Data engineering centered are also looking at quality, by the way, but they are also focused on resources, pipelines, the compute infrastructure. So they may be looking at performance, uptime, cost. So you see, so the slightly different personas, and they may be like a data engineer may be interested in those pieces. So the total scope includes consumption, i.e. data quality, and then data engineering, which includes all the pipeline, the compute, and all of that. Most vendors are today in the data consumption side. And why is that? Is first of all, it is a low-hanging fruit. Secondly, it is also a problem that's facing us in our face. Why have we not fixed data quality in 40 years that we've been talking about it? Go fix my data quality, because if you don't fix that, then my machine learning models are junk. So that's why you see there's a heavy focus on doing data consumption centered. Data engineering is a bit harder to do because you really have to understand number of Spark executors, how much memory did they use, and things like that. But that is where the cost comes in. So both are extremely important, and that is the overall scope. I just want to add, there could be a number of other things that to me do not fall under data observability, but are very close cousins. ML observability, business KPI observability. And then there are a bunch of companies that are addressing that. Maybe in future, we'll have privacy observability that will notify us if there is, AWS S3 bucket certainly was left unprotected, so things like that. So that is how I look at data observability.
Wow, that is awesome, Sanjeev, and you're also being the trailblazer that you've always been. You're charting a roadmap to the future. Love it. Yeah. So from Acceldata's perspective, we tend to focus on the data engineering side, all the way from data ingest to consumption side, meaning we started off solving the harder problems, and as we build out our roadmap, we are evolving towards the full data observability for the modern data stack. That's how we look at ourselves. So that is fantastic. So, all right, someone on this session who's listening to this, okay, I've liked what Sanjeev has been saying so far. How do I get started?
So, okay.
I might have confused two things. Okay, two questions. Okay. When should I get started, and how should I get started? I think I put them out of sequence here. Either way.
Yeah, no worries at all. I think this is a great question, and I have to say, Girish, thank you for your kind words. Sharing is gathered from talking to people like you and others in the industry, the consumers, the vendors. So I just cannot take credit for all of that. I was perplexed by these questions that you just asked. When should I get started? How do I know that data observability is something I need? So I came up with talking to people and understanding their needs with two things. One is, how much time are you spending on fixing operational issues? If your team is spending more than 50% of the time on fixing operational issues, trying to debug why something didn't work, clear sign you should get data observability in place. Second criteria that I found very interesting is, how big is your data engineering team? If you have a small team and a few data sources, you probably may not need data observability, or you may want to experiment and keep it in your warm bucket for future. But if you expand your data engineering team really fast, that means you're growing rapidly. And now let's say you're more than 10 people in your data engineering team. I think it is now time for you to look into data observability. So those are two. I'm sure there are many other criteria items that maybe you can add. I found these two to be quantifiable rather than more subjective. And what should you do when you think you need data observability is you should look at the tools in the market. And like we've been saying throughout this thing, there are a lot of tools. I think there are about 25, 30 that I'm aware of in the space, and we'll see what happens, because remember I said one got acquired last week by IBM. So as the market tightens its finances, there might be some consolidation, but right now there are a lot of tools. So benchmark them, do a proof of concept, set up a center of excellence, and then start exploring the capabilities of these tools with respect to your business requirements.
Right. No, that's very good. So it reminds me of a customer that we have, PhonePe. So often, in the data space, or particularly historically in the application observability space, people had a reactiveness to the business. They said, hey, I don't need this thing called observability or monitoring. And then I launched the service. Then they realized, oops, I have no idea I'm experiencing outages. There is a reactiveness to the business. There are some customers who do that, but PhonePe, in contrast, started with a proactive approach. PhonePe, for those of you who are not familiar, they're a fintech company in India. They currently have about 350 million, more than plus active subscribers. And they transact anywhere from insurance purchases to making payments. And they transact roughly about $1 trillion over a year using PhonePe system. So the architects and the founders of PhonePe, right from day one, they knew they had a proactive approach to designing their system. So they designed in observability from the initial days. When they approached us, we were still a small company then. They wanted us to provide the proactive monitoring, troubleshooting, alerting, so that they build a system that not only scales, and it was done in a proactive manner. So that's one example. And the other example I want to mention is, as we know, there are a lot of new cloud data platforms, the likes of Snowflake and now Databricks, among others, and GCP Query. What we are seeing is, as customer spend continues to grow, they're trying to better utilize their licensing. With Snowflake, as you know, it's a consumption-based model. People are trying to make sure that they're getting the right value from their Snowflake spend. So we call that spend intelligence. So we are providing the intelligence into their licensing and how they're using it. So in other words, again, a proactive approach is where I see the leading companies do that. There's always inherent reactiveness, Sanjeev, as you know, in the business, but sometimes that tends to be more firefighting as opposed to making sure you're designing in, right? So those are two extreme ranges of what we are seeing to date.
Girish, to summarize what you're saying, I think the hallmark of a leader on the business side would be the one that is more proactive than reactive.
Right. Yeah, you're right. And that's what we're seeing as we have some of the conversations with our customers and prospects. We see the line of business, the IT teams, the data teams. It could be an army of people we are talking to. We love that, mostly because we want to make sure that there is rigor. They think through from a compute or performance side, the database side, the pipeline side, the tooling side of things, as well as on the consumption side from perhaps from a data analyst and data officer perspective. We make sure that we provide that across what I call the data value chain. So
nice.
Cool. So anything else? I think that was a great discussion so far. We covered about what's data observability, why should anyone care about it, and I think that those were great tips you had regarding how to get started, right? So the two broad categories of solutions in the marketplace. Anything else, Sanjeev, you would like to add to our audience before we call it a wrap?
I think this is going to be a very big market. If we see how rapidly Snowflake and Databricks are growing, and those are just two platforms. There's BigQuery, there's Redshift, and then there are all the existing vendors for the longest time, like Teradata, MongoDB is coming into this space, Oracle, all of Microsoft, Synapse, and all. So if we add how big this market is, it's $250 billion just the data warehouse market. Some people think that this market is going to be $1 trillion. Just a data storage, warehouse, object store. If that's the size of this market, and if you take just 1% of that, that's a multi-billion-dollar industry right there. And if you can save cost, 1% of your cost, then the whole thing pays for itself. So I'm pretty upbeat on this category, and I think we are only just seeing the beginning of data observability. And just like observability, where I mentioned there are all these billion-dollar companies and they all are pretty successful, hopefully we'll see data observability get to that point in the next few years.
You're right, Sanjeev. We are also bullish. We hope to be the next billion-dollar company. That's Acceldata.io in the space.
Yeah.
And we truly have a very unique and differentiated approach to provide data observability. So folks, there you have it. Sanjeev Mohan, principal at Sanjmo. Thank you very much, Sanjeev, for your time. And I'm sure we'll do more of such events where we talk about topics around data observability or data management overall.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. I love this. This is great stuff. Take care.
Thank you, Sanjeev. And folks, let's look forward to the next episode in this series, which we'll have in another few weeks from now. Thank you.